Oh gosh, that picture isn't supposed to show up like that. But, well, to begin. Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm here to teach you how to say no, which ironically is probably the most hypocritical thing I've ever said. To those who know me, I'm the most overcommitted Georgetown student they probably know. As you probably got from the introduction, I'm not only taking 18 credits this semester as a first semester senior, but I work as a project manager for a social goods venture fund. I just recently opened up my own startup that's focused on French fries, out of everything I could have chosen. I work as the president for my major that I know absolutely nothing about. And I ultimately want to try to cut at least 5 pounds by the end of this semester. Now, my schedule may seem pretty bad, but I'll have you know that I'm definitely not cutting 5 pounds by the end of the semester. So realistically, it's honestly not that bad. But despite the fact that my life appears to be this never-ending strings of yeses, the first words that I've ever spoke was actually the word no. Now, you may be imagining, based off of this picture, that I said this word when I was 2 or 3 years old, this adorable, chubby Matthew Wang, who just said no because I probably didn't want to take a bath. But the first time I ever spoke was when I was 7. For the first third of my life, I was mute, speechless, unable to communicate my desires. And then for my parents, this caused a deep pain and concern that I would never understand. Growing up, now that I think about it, it was pretty humorous how I actually try to communicate with them. When you don't have any way to really communicate your words, you're stuck with your actions. And the only thing that I knew as a baby was to cry, funny enough. But as the parents do know, when your child cries, most likely you think your child's hungry. But my tears were my universal form of communication. I used my tears in order to communicate whether or not I wanted to go to the bathroom, or even smaller things like if I wanted a pencil to draw something. But every single time that I cried, I was simply fed, which over time led me to be a very fat baby. Now, if this picture is really blurry, but if you can, I'll promise me that you'll believe me when I say that my fingers there were at least 3 times the size of my fingers are now, if that makes sense at all. But I went through a lot of hard work to cut those pounds off. But I was extremely overfed, and it was just because growing up, I didn't have that ability to say no. I was overly compliant with my surroundings, and I didn't have an outlet for me to disrupt the own processes in my life. And as days grew into years, my parents only grew more and more concerned for this uncertain future that I had before me. And as any loving and caring parents would do, they did the action that they thought would make me the happiest. They decided to enroll me part-time in a special education institution. Now, I'm not saying that I had a traumatizing time in special ed. Special ed was actually great. I had a loving and caring teacher who I believe that if she was my ESL teacher when I was in the public education system, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be standing up here today. I would probably be someone completely different, and I probably would have been able to learn how to speak much earlier. But in special ed, besides the fact that we got a ton of surprise birthday parties and killer nap time, I've never slept that well in my entire life. The purpose of special ed wasn't to teach me how to be a functional person in society. The whole purpose of special ed was to make me compliant and to make me an easier asset so that I would comply to all the actions that my parents would say or that society would command me to do. The purpose wasn't to teach me how to grow. And it didn't help that the public education system was even more limiting than special ed. They had next to zero capacity to help anybody with my special needs to learn and progress as a person. I was stagnating. And as days grew into years, my parents' concerns and pains just grew worse and worse and worse. And it came to this point where the doctors were for certain, because of the story was set in place, that I was never going to develop the ability to talk. And my parents, once again, met with the decision that they wanted the happiest life for me as possible, decided that it may have been the full-time transition to make me from a part-time student in a special ed institution and have me fully institutionalized so that I could learn and have a better environment to grow. But it was this moment where something just sparked. There was this one word that rung out through me that I knew for some reason was associated with despair, that was associated with the pain that I always saw in their eyes. There was just this one word that I knew could change my life forever. And it was that moment that I said the word that became the driving force for my life. And that was the first word that I said. And that's when I said no. Now, it wasn't as if I magically was able to speak after I said that word no. It was quite the process in its own. More on the ends of the fact that when the doctor decided to revisit my case, they discovered that the reason that I wasn't able to talk wasn't because I wasn't absorbing the information around me. Rather, it was actually the complete opposite. I was absorbing too much information. In my home, my parents alone speak 3 unique dialects of Chinese. All of them sound completely different from each other. In addition, my father was trying to learn French, and my mom had extremely broken English. So growing up, I had no basis to establish what was right when I talked, or what was the correct path for me to go forward. I didn't understand social cues because I didn't know what was the right way to approach somebody in a conversation. I had zero comprehension of my surroundings. And that meant that I had to start all over again. I had to restructure my life and my language from a point that I just never understood where it even began. But thank God for the best teacher on earth. That's Mr. Television. TV was the best teacher I've ever had in my entire life, and hundreds of hours of soap operas, and that amazing man, David Attenborough on BBC. Oh man, his voice was amazing. To help me develop the best speaking structure that I possibly could ever gain. And it was thanks to television that I learned amazing social cues, like how to be an incredibly creepy person from How I Met Your Mother. I mean, Ted Mosby is definitely the creepiest person I've ever seen in my entire life. If you ask a girl out the same way that he did, let's reconsider and step back a bit. These girls are scared of you. But when I was able to develop my first cognizant thoughts, I did what any 12-year-old would do. I asked the girl to be my girlfriend. Now, it wasn't just any girl. This was my childhood friend, or as much as you could be friends with somebody who didn't talk for half of their life up until that point in time. Really, really surprised that she even managed to be friends with me. But keep in mind that my whole view of what social contexts were up to that point in time were entirely built upon soap operas, which meant that when I thought it came time to asking her out, it had to be a dimly lit room, have amazing background music, and you just had to have the best romantic atmosphere possible. It was a dimly lit classroom, I could say that. And the music selection, oh man. Crash Into Me by Dave Matthews. That song's not appropriate for little kids, it really isn't. I don't know how that got on the radio. That's a weird song. And that's not even the cherry on top. You would think that after watching hundreds of soaps, that I would at least be able to mutter the words, hey, do you want to be my girlfriend? Or I like you. Or maybe even something on even like the more extreme end would even be better, where I said like, hey, let's get ice cream, hold hands, and maybe get married. There's no, not maybe, we're getting married. But no. The thing I said, which I regret every single day in my entire life, was I said the words, out with me. What does that even mean? I mean, if anybody could tell me what that means, I would be more than obliged to pay you as much money as you want. But those are the words that came out of my mouth. And I emphasize the fact that it was a period at the end. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a request. I just said, out with me. Obviously enough, she said no. No hard feelings. But I mean, she came back because that bowl cut, that face, and that amazing sense of style, how can you beat that? You really can't. You really can't. Ended up going out for 4 years. Don't know how she managed to go out with me for 4 years when I had extremely broken English at that time period. A real trooper, a real trooper. But that moment allowed me to expand past my point because I was collecting this branch of information that was all around me, and I had nowhere to exercise this emotion that was locked inside. And for me, the only person who I knew would forgive any of my actions, no matter how stupid they were, was this girl who basically lived and just handled me for the first 12 years of my silent life. So there's no better option out there for me, but she was also way out of my league. It's a bunch of complications. But that was my first ability to really branch out and really figure out and test the grounds. So fast forward a few years, I find myself in high school in danger of being known in the yearbook as that person where everybody asks, did he even go here? So I decided that the best way for me to make a mark in the world was to put on my extremely oversized suit, step in front of a classroom full of people I've never met before in my entire life, stand across a person, and start yelling at them. If you haven't guessed it, welcome to Policy Debate. What a group. And it's in this world of policy debate where all of your actions are dependent on how fast you can speak and how fast you can insult the other person. Both of which I was horrible at. I was destroyed in every single competition I went to. I had absolutely zero idea of what they were saying or what were their credentials to support any of the arguments that they were saying at all. But it was in this environment that forced me to learn. Because up to that point in time, I was complacent. I was settling for an amount of information I was gathering, and my growth wasn't allowing me to be the person who I wanted to be. So I took that step back, and I realized the only way forward is to throw yourself into this position where you're forced to be aggressive with this stranger you probably never see in your entire life and make fun of their family for 5 minutes straight. But it was thanks to policy debate that pushed me forward and made me reflect back on the times that Mr. TV taught me the most beautiful lessons of my entire life. And that's where David Attenborough's speaking structure allowed me to figure out how I wanted to present myself. If you guys haven't heard or watched those BBC Nature documentaries, how he approaches it is that he makes it crystal clear what his intentions are. So crystal clear that even if you put a baby in front of the television, they would probably start being able to speak within 2 years. His ability to enunciate and his ability to just make everything so easy to digest was the pinnacle for me to understand and how to portray myself as a person. And it was thanks to him that I became known as one of the strongest negative debaters in my county. And I personally call myself Dayton Attenborough without the English accent, but I never really caught on. So I brought that oversized suit that I wore in high school, and I brought myself to Georgetown University. And as I sat and I was rushing through the most hectic season of the year last year in junior year, which to those who are in the business school would know is recruiting season, I saw all of my friends going from event to event trying to get that top-notch six-figure internship that will lead them to a guaranteed safe future. And as I sat there wondering, why would you want to work 10 plus hours a day for people you probably never get to know in your entire life, and also be yelled at by strangers for 5 hours straight a day as well? And as I asked my friend why he wanted to work at Morgan Stanley, he proceeded to look at me with the most stupid look I've ever seen in my entire life, and proceeded to say, "It's Morgan Stanley." Didn't help at all. Really wish he knew more, but he actually, he didn't even get an interview with them, so it ended up being that he knew absolutely nothing as well. So it didn't really help. But that moment just made me think. I was thinking, why would I ever push myself to suffer for 4+ years in a position that I'm not passionate about? Why would I put myself through that suffering? It doesn't make sense. And I took a step back and I said, no. It's time for me to pursue something that I only had an inkling, I could only just imagine could happen. And that's when I said, take a step back, and I found Spud Buds with 2 of my co-founders here. We decided to take a step out because Spud Buds marked a moment where we all took a step back and reflected on what we really wanted. And then for me, Spud Buds allowed me to reflect that I wasn't ready to be a banker or ever will be ready to be a banker. I wasn't ready to be a computer science engineer, and I don't think I would ever be ready in the future to do that as well. It made me recognize that if I ever wanted to live in the present, I have to take that step back and learn how to say no. And it was that moment where I had to be introspective and analyze what made me me. And I mean, we also made some pretty bomb fries. They're really good. Because the whole point of Spud Buds is to challenge your taste buds. It's to make you reevaluate what you perceive as normal and what you perceive is the norm. I mean, these are 2 of our more standard flavors, but we sell a spicy peanut butter mayo, which you probably will never want to try in your entire life, but I promise you, it's the best flavor you possibly ever have in your entire life. But it was through Spud Buds that allowed me to say, I don't want to be the same compliant person that I was when I was 7. That I didn't want to blindly run through college and gain a career that meant nothing to me. And that said, I want all of you to take a step back and really think. When was the last time that you said no for the sake of saying no? When was the last time that you said no to take a step forward? When was the time that you said no because it reflected what you wanted to do? Because for me, when I said no, I became a spudding bud. Thank you all so much.